Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Now yes, I am aware we literally just finished making a video talking about the Patrick Kane rumors and him supposedly on his way to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a potential trade. But guys, believe me, there have been so many other reports and news articles and Twitter threads that I just had to make another video talking about another team that I feel could potentially be also a huge contender in on these sweepstakes, and that being the Edmonton Oilers. There have been so many different reports and articles that have linked these two ideas together, so I had to come on here and give my thoughts, talk about what a price point would be, a couple of players that could be involved in a trade and return to the Blackhawks for Patrick Kane. So we're going to be getting into all that in this video, guys. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're around here, and for question of the day, do you guys think there's a higher likelihood of Patrick Kane being sent over to the Oilers or the Leafs? Be sure to let me know down below. And yeah, without further ado, let's actually get right into this video here. So if you did manage to watch my video on Patrick Kane and the Toronto Maple Leafs, you would know that we talked about a potential price point in a trade for Patrick Kane. And what we settled for was a pretty reasonable 4-asset return in return to the Blackhawks, and it consisted of Matthew Knies, Rasmus Sandin, Alex Kerfoot, and last but not least, Nick Robertson. So it's pretty steep, I'm not going to lie. But to be fair, the player that you're getting in return is the best American player of all time, and he's still able to produce at a very high level despite his age at 33 years old, almost in retirement zone. But what do you realistically expect? And I wanted to come on here and talk about who I feel a couple of pieces or players that the Oilers could potentially bring to the table to perhaps entice the management of the Blackhawks to get them to send Patrick Kane over to oil country. And I think it's settled that a decent return for Patrick Kane would be about 4 different assets. And I think in this case, it would be 1 roster player, 1 or 2 different prospects, and then perhaps a pick or another player. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And if I were to start it off, I'd go with a guy like Philip Broberg near the top of the list of players that I would be bringing towards the table in a potential trade for Kane. And hear me out. I feel like Philip Broberg, he's a great player, good defenseman, but, he hasn't really made that well of a transition yet to the point where I feel like the Oilers are comfortable at putting him at the NHL level. So do they really need him? They have a pretty decent defensive core anyways already. And the situation right here really parallels what we were talking about with Rasmus Sandin, where you have a young, good defensive prospect, both Swedish players, funnily enough, and they just weren't able to produce at the level in which they could crack their respective lineups. And it's not entirely their fault. I mean, part of it is because they're on such good teams, and maybe a shakeup or a fresh start is needed for these players. So I feel like Philip Broberg is in a very similar spot to Rasmus Sandin, to the point where I had to put him on this list in a potential return for a Kane trade. So Philip Broberg, the 8th overall pick in 2019, I think going over to Chicago could be really beneficial for the guy. He'd be getting a lot more opportunity, playing time, playing in high-pressure situations. Just the scenarios that he would have never got playing with the Oilers with their deep defensive core. So yeah, Philip Broberg is my first player on this list. Now, the second player that I would consider to be used as bait from the Edmonton Oilers would be Ryan McLeod. And this guy, he's still pretty young, 22 years old, second-round pick by the Oilers, 40th overall. And this guy right here, I would classify him as the replacement forward, just someone that can jump into the lineup of the Blackhawks and, basically do a decent job because they have NHL experience. And I really think that Ryan McLeod can be that player. I mean, he's had a full season now under his belt. He got 71 games played last season, 21 points, 9 goals, 12 assists. It's decent. I'm sure he's looking to have a more prominent role next year, whether it's on the Oilers or the Blackhawks if he does end up getting moved. And yeah, overall, I feel like for both parties, this makes a lot of sense. On the Blackhawks side, they're looking to accumulate as many young, talented pieces as they possibly can, and this guy could definitely be added to that list. And, the Oilers, on the other hand, I really don't think they need Ryan McLeod because their forward depth is already so good. And, obviously getting Patrick Kane will definitely help that out a lot. So I feel like this isn't really that big of a loss. So yeah, Ryan McLeod is my candidate as the replacement forward going to the Blackhawks. Now, the third piece, and this might be a bit of a tall order, but hear me out. I'm going with Dylan Holloway, the Oilers' 2020 first overall selection, 14th overall. And this is a tough one. It's the equivalent to Matthew Knies, a player that you really don't want to give up. But if you want to get a guy like Patrick Kane, you might have to make that sacrifice. And, the guy is only 20 years old. definitely has not reached nearly what we know what his ceiling is. And honestly, man, this guy on Bakersfield last year got 22 points in 33 games played as a 19-year-old. He got over a point per game on the University of Wisconsin. That's really good. And ultimately, man, I feel like if you want to get a guy like Patrick Kane, this might be the guy that would really entice the Blackhawks management, because at the end of the day, this is what they want as a part of their rebuild. Players just like this. And, you know, if the Oilers actually had the courage to give up this guy already in his career, then maybe you could be looking at Patrick Kane. But until then, it's a lot easier said than done. My third player, Dylan Holloway, as part of this trade. And the fourth piece or asset, I guess you could say, could be something as easy as like a first-round pick. You have other guys like Xavier Bourgault, but, you know, I think a first-round pick would also do it. So that basically concludes it. First-round pick, Dylan Holloway, Ryan McLeod, and Philip Broberg. That is a pretty crazy combination of players there, and a lot to give up for a guy like Patrick Kane, who is on the tail end of his career. But as we all know, the Blackhawks are going to be getting a lot of offers, and if you want to stand out and win these sweepstakes, you might have to go a bit above and beyond. And I feel like if the Oilers wanted any chance at getting Patrick Kane, this is something like what I feel they would have to give up to get that. So yeah, man, let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Like the video, and I'll be sure to catch you guys all real soon. Peace and take care.